It was pouring rain. Mrs. Land staggered down a small alley in Chicago's little village, clutching a sodden stack of newspapers in one hand and a yellowed piece of paper in the other, shaking as if her life depended on it. A truck rushed by, splashing rainwater onto the sidewalk, but she paid no attention. Her skinny legs continued to move towards the local police station. She muttered, "I saw it. It was that boy. There was no mistaking it." The photo in her hand was just a blurry silhouette of a person standing in the middle of an empty lot. Behind it was the sign of a long-closed auto repair shop. But there was one detail that made her freeze from the moment she picked it up: the red bracelet with the words, TNL 2013 inches, the same bracelet that Tin wore on the last day before he went missing. Chicago, fall 2013. Early in the morning, the air in Little Village still held a bit of the night's mist. The distant sound of a train whistle mingled with the roar of cars starting up throughout the Latino and Asian neighborhoods. A small grocery store was just opening, its yellow lights illuminating the damp street. Across the street, Mrs. Lan was boiling water on an old stove in her cramped second-floor apartment in an apartment complex that had once been an abandoned military barracks. Tin, 9 years old, her daughter's only son, was sitting on the wooden floor, wearing socks and listening to the morning radio. "Grandma, today I have gym class. I have to run. Can I wear my new shoes?" Mrs. Lan shook her head, pouring tea and frowning. "Wait until your birthday. Your old pair is still fine." Tin didn't complain, just grinned. His smile softened her heart. He was the rare child who didn't make demands or whine, ever since his father died in a construction accident on Chicago's North Side. He had matured beyond his years. Every morning, after a simple breakfast of sandwiches and boiled eggs, he cleaned up and put on his backpack to go to school without being asked. It was Wednesday. Tin showed his grandmother a painting he had just finished, a scene of a doctor treating a child. "I want to be a doctor. Like in the movie we saw the other day. Remember?" Mrs. Lan patted her grandchild's head and nodded. "Yes, you just have to study hard. I believe in you." When Tin left his house at 7:15 a.m., the wind had picked up. The road leading to Cesar E. Chavez Elementary School passed an old auto repair shop, Lincoln Auto Repair. Every time he passed by, Tin would stop for a few seconds to look in, his eyes lighting up as he saw people lifting cars, changing tires, or checking engines. The owner of the shop was a Mexican-American named Raul, but the main worker was Manny, a muscular middle-aged man with greasy brown hair who wore headphones while working and rubbed his eyes like someone who had not slept. Manny had smiled at Tin a few times. The boy liked to listen to the sound of the engine, so he would sometimes stop by the door and watch for a few minutes before moving on. "Mrs. Lan knows that," she also said. "Don't stand there for too long, son. It's dangerous for cars to come in and out, and you shouldn't talk to strangers too much." Tin obeyed, but his curious eyes were still drawn to that mechanical world. In his mind, the cars were like giant mechanical beasts, powerful and mysterious. But then that fall, a very normal day, turned into a nightmare from which I never woke up. On Tuesday morning, October 15th, 2013, Tin left home as usual. His mother, Hong, was working the night shift at St. Anthony Hospital and had not yet returned. Mrs. Lan had prepared a lunchbox and wished her grandson a happy school day. 7:15 a.m., Tin left the apartment, and that was the last time she saw him. At 11:40 that morning, the elementary school called home to inform that Tin did not come to class. At first, Mrs. Lan thought he might have gotten lost, or gone to a friend's house to play. But when the whole afternoon passed without a trace of him, and Tin's friends said they had not seen him at the school gate, she began to tremble. She cycled around the neighborhood, asking every neighbor and every shop owner along the road. No one had seen Tin after 7:30 a.m. At 5 p.m., she called Tin's mother, Ms. Hong, who immediately left her shift and ran home in tears. At 6 p.m., Chicago police officially accepted the missing person report. Chicago, October 15, 2013. That morning the wind was calm, a little milder than usual. The sky was ashen gray, the clouds low as if they were descending on the old roof. It was the kind of weather that would make people sleepy. But to Tin, it brought a different feeling, as if there was something waiting at the end of the road. Tin left home at 7:15 as usual, wearing a gray spaceship sweatshirt, a blue backpack, and worn-out sneakers. Little did he know that everything that day, from his footsteps to the looks of the last people who saw him, would become the final clue in the missing, unsolved file 10 years later. He turned right onto Kedzie Street, past the deserted bus stop and past the Sunshine Cleaners Laundry at 7:25 a.m. The last clear image of him was captured on camera. As he walked past, he turned his head to look back at the sound of a car honking behind him. The next corner was Lincoln Auto Repair, with its metal door half open. Inside, dim fluorescent lights illuminated oil stains and the sound of a drill echoed intermittently. Tin slowed down as usual, stopped in front of the door, and looked inside. A man in an oily overall, Manny, was working hard under the black Toyota. He looked up and saw Tin, smiling. "Hey, little man, still like cars?" Tin smiled back and nodded. He took his backpack off his shoulder, placed it on the edge of the door, and took out a small carton of milk. "I don't have to go to class early today. It's a teacher's meeting. There's still some time." Manny stood up, wiped his hands with a dirty rag, and walked toward the door. "Do you want to see inside?" Tin hesitated. "Just a little. My grandmother told me not to talk to strangers. But I'm not a stranger. You've been watching me for a month. Just a few minutes. I'll show you how to check the engine." The boy hesitated, then walked in. 7:34 a.m. A man named Julio, a bread delivery driver, drove past Lincoln's. He said he saw a black-haired boy standing in the doorway, talking to an adult. He saw nothing unusual. 7:45 a.m. A Puerto Rican woman who lives across the street heard a strange noise, like something falling or metal clanging. She thought someone had dropped something, so she didn't call the police. 8 a.m. Cesar Chavez school roll call. Tin is absent. The homeroom teacher thought Tin might be absent sick, not the first time a student had called without notice. She did not call home. When Mrs. Lan received the call that her grandson had not shown up for class at 11:40 a.m., her heart immediately started pounding. Without waiting any longer, she borrowed a neighbor's bicycle and cycled along Tin's familiar route. She asked at every store, pharmacy, and grocery store. Lincoln Auto Repair was closed. The gate was locked, and no one was inside. At 4:30 p.m., she and her daughter, Hong, officially reported the incident to the police. It had been nearly 9 hours since Tin left home. The police investigation began with CCTV footage. A copy of the footage was recorded of Tin walking through the laundromat. They then approached surrounding locations, including Lincoln Auto Repair. Manny, who had not yet left Chicago, testified, "I didn't see any boy come into the shop. I worked alone since morning, and ran out to get food at 7:40. Maybe I didn't notice." There were no security cameras at the store, and Manny was not prosecuted because there was no evidence to convict him. The Vietnamese community in Chicago was distraught. Many people contributed to printing flyers, forming search groups, and holding vigils. But after 3 weeks, with no new clues, the search gradually died down. In January 2014, the Chicago Police Department closed the case with the note, "Missing child. No active lead." The file was placed in archive number 723C. Tin, the boy who dreamed of becoming a doctor and drew colorful pictures, was listed among hundreds of unexplained names in the city's missing history. But there was one person who never accepted that ending, Mrs. Lan. Every day, she still sells newspapers along 26th Street, still sits on the same corner of the old wooden bench near the market, picking up scrap metal while watching the people passing by, as if hoping that at some point, the boy will step out from the crowd and call her clearly. Once a month, she went to the police station, carrying Tin's picture, and asked if there was any news. The answer was always, "Sorry, Mrs. Nguyen, nothing has changed." 10 years later, in October 2023, when a sudden rainstorm hit Little Village, Ms. Lan was picking up cans under the overpass near 31st Street. A plastic bag washed up at her feet, moldy, with a torn corner. She was about to throw it away, until she saw something inside. A blurry, damp photo with burned corners. But she recognized it immediately. The red bracelet with the words she engraved on it in 2013. TNL, Happy 9. Chicago. The years after the disappearance. While time passed like a rushing river, Mrs. Lan was still stuck in an inescapable moment, that October morning, when Tin walked out the door with a bright smile and never returned. She was visibly older, her hair was gray, her back was more bent, but her steps were still steady every morning as she pushed a small cart full of newspapers and cans around the little village market. People used to call her the Asian newsagent. Although no one said it, some looked at her with pity, others with suspicion. To them, she was a person living with a dead past, holding on to a pain that was wearing her down. Someone once asked, "Why don't you move? This place reminds me of the past too much." She just shook her head. "It hurts everywhere, but here, if one day the boy comes back, at least he will know where to find her." Every Sunday morning, she lights a stick of incense at the foot of the overpass where she first printed flyers looking for her grandson. And every month, she prints a new set of flyers, even though she knows people have stopped reading them. 10 years. No sign, no explanation, no ending. After 3 years of suffering, Ms. Hong, her daughter, moved to another state, taking with her old records and memories she did not want to keep. "Mom, don't torture yourself anymore. I can't take it anymore. It's gone, Mom." But she did not believe it. In her heart, a feeling like an invisible string kept pulling her back, that the boy had not gone far. That his death, if it had happened, had not been seen by the naked eye, had not been recognized by the heart. She didn't cry much anymore. But every night, she still buried her face in Tin's old shirt, still hearing the faint sound of his footsteps running around the house, his cheerful laughter echoing like a sound imprint in her memory. And then, one autumn day in 2023 when the rain poured down like pouring out grievances, fate knocked on the door again. The dirty plastic bag from the sewer rolled around her leg, light as a joke, but inside it was the heaviest thing she had ever held, a blurry, damp, mold-stained photo, clearly taken in the lot near the Lincoln Auto Repair shop years ago. And in the photo, the silhouette of a child standing with his head tilted. Blurred, but the red bracelet was painfully clear. The familiar hand-carved words, TNL, Happy 9, made her speechless. It was the birthday present she had made herself for her grandson. She didn't sleep that night. Her hands shook as she went through the wooden box containing Tin's remains, an old drawing, a pencil, a pair of torn gloves, and a piece of uniform fabric. Everything was filled with a warm, painful feeling. Tin had left a mark. It had never gone away. The next morning, she took the photo to the local police station on 26th Street. The reception desk was staffed by a young white American policeman, his eyes busy and somewhat tired. "My nephew went missing 10 years ago. This is his bracelet. I just found this photo. Please, look closely." The policeman looked at her and took the photo. Hesitantly, he tilted his head, trying to see it in the light. "This photo has no stamp, no date or time. Are you sure it's related?" She squeezed her hand. "I'm sure. I made this bracelet for him. I can prove it. Yes, we will take note. But you understand, the case is closed, unless there is more concrete evidence." Before she finished speaking, she stood up, her voice choked but firm. "If you don't find it, I will find it myself." And she really did. That afternoon, she returned to the lot where Lincoln Auto Repair used to be. It was now a rented storage yard, surrounded by iron fences and a faded sign that read, "Valley Storage." She stood outside the fence, peering through the old truck beds, her heart sinking as she realized that the scene from the photo, the broken iron pole, the brown brick wall, and the oil-stained cement, was still there. Despite the changes of time, the space still held secrets that no one had discovered. A middle-aged black security guard stopped her. "You can't come in here. This place is forbidden to strangers." "I'm not going in. I just need to ask. 10 years ago, this place was a car repair shop, right?" He hesitated and then nodded. "Yes, that shop closed a long time ago. The owner went bankrupt, and the worker went somewhere unknown." Her eyes lit up. "That worker's name is Manny, right?" The guard frowned. "How do you know?" Memories came back like a reel of film. Manny, the shop, his eyes full of intent, and the way he disappeared without a trace. She knew she didn't have much time left. But for the first time in 10 years, she had a clear feeling. The path to the truth was open. Chicago. 3 days after finding the photo, Mrs. Land sat in front of an old printer at the copy shop on 18th and California. In front of her, a Filipino student named Aaron was trying to adjust the contrast on the screen. "Are you sure you want to zoom in on this part?" Aaron asked, pointing to the right half of the photo. "Yes. The place with the brick wall and the iron pillar. If you look closely, you will see the shadow, and that red bracelet. Do you see it?" Aaron narrowed his eyes, then nodded slightly. "It's blurry, but I'll try to make it as clear as possible." The printer whirred. The first piece of photo paper appeared, still blurry, but clearer than the original. A low-angle photo, taken from a corner of an empty lot. The lighting in the photo was off, but Mrs. Land knew the person in the photo was Tin. No one else. The bracelet was just a smudge of red, but she recognized it immediately, not because of the color, but because of the strange feeling it evoked, a chill down her spine. As if someone from the past had turned to look at her through a blurred sheet. In the afternoon, she returned to the local police station. This time it was no longer the young policeman from the day before, but a middle-aged woman with cold eyes, Sergeant Rebecca Moore. "Do you want to add evidence?" Moore asked, his voice unfriendly. Mrs. Land handed over the new printout, her voice trembling but determined. No. I believe this is part of the disappearance from back then. This boy is my nephew." Moore held the photo and sighed. "Ms. Nguyen, the case has been closed for nearly a decade. We need a strong enough reason to request an order to reopen the case. And this photo, while interesting, is not enough. So when is enough? When we find the bones." Her voice rose, strangely sharp. Moore looked at her for a moment, then shook his head slightly. "I'll give it to the archives. But you have to understand, there are hundreds of cases like this, sitting in the corner of the hallway waiting for the receipt to be printed." Mrs. Land bowed her head, her thin hands clasped together as if clinging to the last thread of hope. "Are you the one who found the photo near Damon Bridge?" A soft voice rang out from behind. She turned around. A young woman with long black hair, wearing a police uniform but no gun, stood there with a concerned look on her face. "I'm Jenny Tran, a fall intern with the Chicago Police Department. I happened to overhear your story while I was in charge of checking the report yesterday. Can you show me the photo?" Mrs. Land hesitated, then showed the photo. Jenny leaned in closer and looked closely. Her eyes widened slightly. "The red bracelet, the letters, TNL. Is that your grandchild's name?" "Tin Nguyen Loc, missing in 2013, 10 years. Jenny nodded slowly. "I am also of Vietnamese descent. Grandma, my family used to live in Little Village before moving. My mother mentioned this incident. The community was abuzz, then gradually forgot." Mrs. Land's eyes suddenly softened, as if a final channel of information had just been connected. "If you don't mind," Jenny hesitated, "I would like to ask your permission to take a copy of this photo. I can ask my acquaintance who works in forensic photography to analyze it further." "Do you believe me?" "Not only do I trust her, I trust her intuition. She never gives up." That evening, Jenny returned home with the digital scan. She opened file number 723C, Nguyen Tin Loc's missing person file, and flipped through the old reports. Strange. The initial investigation report stated the Lincoln Auto Repair Shop did not have cameras. But the witness record from the car wash next door stated, "I heard the sound of the camera scanning automatically from the Lincoln shop every time a car entered or left." One more thing, Manny, the mechanic, claimed. No one came into the store that morning, but Julio, the bread delivery driver, reported seeing a child talking to someone in front of the store at 7:34 a.m. Why is this not made clear? Jenny marked it again. She opened Google Maps to look at the old photo. In the 2013 photo, there was a second iron post behind the parking lot, exactly the same as the faded iron post in Mrs. Land's photo. She shivered slightly. The next morning, Jenny brought the color printing results to see Mrs. Land. "You're right. The location in the photo is the back corner of the Lincoln Auto Repair Shop, now a container yard. Do you believe it?" "Believe me, but to investigate, I cannot do it officially without instructions." However, she looked at her, her eyes fierce. I can help you find the old person involved. And if necessary, I can take you back to the scene to compare. Mrs. Land tearfully said, My name is Jenny, but she looks like Knock. Tin's friend from back then. She also has the same eyes. Jenny smiled, then stood up. We'll start where it all ended, the lot behind the auto repair shop. Chicago. An early winter afternoon. The sky was calm, but people's hearts were in turmoil. Mrs. Land stood in front of the rusty 2-meter-high iron gate of the old container yard, formerly Lincoln Auto Repair. Under the slanting sunset light, the scene had a cold, desolate look. The ground was full of rocks, and a few containers were stacked haphazardly like repressed, buried memories. Next to her was Jenny Tran, a young intern who had volunteered to follow her back to this place. They had not entered through the main gate. Jenny had used her ID card to pretend to be a surveyor to meet the night shift manager, an old American man named Wallace, who had worked here for more than 7 years. You said you were the engineer testing the foundation settlement for the underground power line project? Wallace tilted his head, his eyes half doubtful, half bored. Yes, I need to remeasure the terrain of the western area, the section with the exposed concrete edge. We have received feedback about unusual subsidence, and need to verify it, Jenny said clearly, her voice calm like a professional. Mr. Wallace shrugged. Everything sinks here. Some people even poured concrete illegally before. But just look. I won't stop you. Jenny nodded her thanks. Mrs. Land quietly followed behind, her hands tightly holding the laminated photo, her eyes scanning every inch of land, every corner of the wall. The area they were standing in was the same as the blurry photo they had found in the sewer. The leaning iron pillar and the brick wall were still there, only now they were covered in time and dust. Jenny took out her phone and opened the restored photo, comparing every detail. The angle, the shadows, the position of the pillar. This is it, she said softly. The photo was taken from about a meter to the left, knee level, as if someone had taken it in a hurry. Or placed the camera on the ground. Mrs. Land nodded, her eyes filled with tears. It used to stand here. My nephew used to stand here. Jenny stepped close to the edge of the cracked cement floor, where there was an irregular bulge, as if a later layer had been added. She knelt down and tapped the metal ruler. Click. It was thicker than the rest. She turned to Mrs. Land. Do you hear that? The sound is thicker. This place is filled with more. It's not like the old foundation. Jenny marked it with temporary paint, then took a photo and sent it to an old friend who worked in the Geological Survey Department. You'll probably need an old foundation map of this area to verify. If this concrete was poured less than 10 years ago, then this isn't just a building violation. Mr. Wallace, seeing that they had been hanging around for too long, turned back and asked, Are you two planning to stay here until tonight? Jenny calmly asked again, When did you start working here? Me? 2016. Before that, the place was deserted after the auto repair shop closed. When I got the job, my boss said the back floor had been reinforced with concrete left by the previous owner. There were no documents either. We thought it was probably to cover up the smell of leaking engine oil. Jenny was stunned. Does anyone remember who dumped? Wallace thought for a moment, then frowned. Yes, at that time, one weekend night in 2016, a truck arrived very early. The driver was Latino. I don't remember his face, but there was a mechanic with him wearing a blue overall, curly hair, always wearing sunglasses. Mrs. Land blurted out, Manny. Wallace squinted. That's the guy. Oh, Manny. He mentioned it somewhere. How did you know? Jenny glanced at Mrs. Land, then turned back to Wallace. Can you do a report on this? Email it to me? Wallace waved his hand. I don't want to get into trouble. Jenny opened her wallet and pulled out a piece of paper with anonymous information in the Witness Confidentiality program, where Jenny had briefly interned. You don't need to reveal your name, but what you just said might help solve a missing child case. Wallace hesitated, then nodded slightly. As it got dark, Mrs. Land and Jenny stood by the yellow lamppost, looking back at the container yard. The sound of a train echoed in the distance, and the sound of car horns mixed with the sound of the wind. I think, under that layer of cement, Mrs. Land choked. Jenny put her hand on her shoulder. If your hunch is correct, That's where the truth lies. But to dig it up, we need a search warrant, and to get that, you need one more link. Mrs. Lan looked up at her. Her eyes seemed to give her the rest of her strength. You need to find Manny. Right? Yes. Jenny replied softly. I need to know where he is. Because only he knows what really happened to Tin. Chicago. Day 5 after the photo was discovered. At Chicago Police Department headquarters. Jenny Tran sat in Sergeant Rebecca Moore's office. The room was small, the light was cold, and a ceiling fan hummed steadily. Jenny placed 2 files on the table. One was a report comparing the scene and reconstructed photos. The other was a recording of Mr. Wallace, the container yard guard. Sergeant Moore, here is evidence that Nguyen Tin Loc's body may be buried under concrete behind the container yard, the same place where Lincoln Auto Repair used to operate. A man named Manny, the former mechanic, was identified by witnesses as having illegally poured concrete in 2016. This is completely illegal, and may involve a serious crime. Moore didn't look at Jenny. She was staring at her phone, swirling her plastic coffee cup. I told you, Tran, what you brought is not enough to convince the court to issue a search warrant. It is private property. You are an intern, not a detective, but we have at least 3 elements: physical evidence, witnesses, and clear signs from the unusual terrain. We have a responsibility to protect children like Tin. Jenny raised her voice, revealing her emotions for the first time. Moore looked up, his eyes not angry, just cold. My dear, I have worked here for over 20 years. Every week there are 10 cases of missing children, and most of them are runaways, divorces, or simply because they don't want to be found. You want to reopen a case from 10 years ago with a blurry photo and a few statements without a second witness? I'm not turning it over. I just want to find the truth, Jenny said, her voice slowing down. Even if it's a body, at least let the baby's grandmother know where it is. Moore sighed and signed a form. You can file the case through the archives, but I won't ask for a search warrant. This case is too sensitive. And too late. That afternoon, Jenny walked out of the police station with the file in her hand and a feeling of resentment building in her chest. She knew this wasn't just apathy, it was the system too tired to care about a case everyone thought was dead. She sat alone at the small coffee shop on the corner of Archer Street, reopening her laptop and flipping through old documents. A note made her stop. Personal suspicion record. Lincoln Auto employee, Manny, last name unknown. Minor criminal history. Was investigated for violent behavior in 2008. Dismissed due to insufficient evidence. She checked the system. The file was locked. But she remembered someone talking about it, someone who had worked on the case from the beginning. Now retired. Detective Frank DeWitt. Frank DeWitt was once a respected member of the little village community. He was one of the few white officers who did not discriminate against immigrants. And he often patrolled the Latino neighborhood without a gun. But after a falling out with his superiors over failing to follow proper procedures in an investigation, he retired early and lived as a recluse in the suburb of Cicero. That evening, Jenny drove to a small, old house with a trellis wrapped around the windows. Frank opened the door with a tired look, a look that seemed used to seeing so many people come to him for help, then left disappointed. Who are you? He asked. Jenny Tran. I am following up on the disappearance of Nguyen Tin Loc. You were in charge of that case in 2013. Frank was silent. Then he opened the door wider. In a small room filled with the smell of old books and burnt coffee, Jenny laid it all out. Photos, recordings, new witness files. Frank sat quietly listening, his eyes downcast as if he were facing an old nightmare. I know Manny, he said. I tried to track him down. But when the case was closed, I was asked to transfer. And the next person in charge chose to close it quickly. They didn't like me because I couldn't keep quiet. Jenny clenched her fists. They know there are signs of concealing crimes but still ignore them? Frank nodded, slowly. They told me, we can't turn the whole city upside down over a missing Asian kid whose family members don't have a voice. And I wasn't strong enough to argue back. Jenny looked at him. Now is the time for you to make amends. Frank was silent, then stood up and walked into the back room. A moment later, he brought out a box of old files. This is my personal copy. It has Manny's last known address, He had insurance in Indiana under a fake name, Marco Alvarez. And here is the license plate number of his truck. Jenny held the file, her hands shaking slightly. I will find him. If you can do it, remember. Don't do it alone. Frank gave her an old card. The business card of a former colleague now at the FBI who could help get an interstate search warrant. On the way back, Jenny called Mrs. Lan. I found Manny's old place. He's in Indiana. Fake name. But I'll find out. Her voice choked. Thank you, Jenny. She had waited 10 years to hear that. Indiana. 1 week after leaving Chicago. Jenny Tran pulled up in front of an old auto repair shop called Alvarez Auto Works. On the outskirts of the small town of Warsaw, Indiana, it was cold. The clouds were thick, and the air smelled of burning rubber and oil. She pulled up her collar, held a notebook in her hand, and looked at the man working under the hood of a car less than 10 meters away. He was about 5'7", broad-shouldered, with dark curly hair, and wore sunglasses even when it was overcast. A tattoo showed on his right wrist when he wiped his forehead, a dragon's head with broken lines. The same tattoo had been described in Frank DeWitt's file from 10 years ago. Manny. He now had a new name, Marco Alvarez, but the image that had been etched into his old file could not be erased. Jenny pulled out her phone, took a series of photos from behind the windshield, and opened the recording app. She took a deep breath and stepped outside. Hello, Jenny said, her voice cheerful. Do you repair passenger cars? Manny turned back, squinting behind his glasses. Depends on the car. Jeep Cherokee. Abnormal engine heat. False temperature alarm. He looked at her for a second, then nodded. Push the cart in. Let me take a look. Jenny smiled, nodded, and stepped back, pretending to open the trunk while she scanned the area. Security cameras, yes, mounted on the left corner of the awning. Facing the parking lot, not the factory. No other employees in sight. Just Manny. He motioned for her to stop, then ducked under the car. When Jenny looked more closely, she spotted a small truck parked in the corner, covered in dust but with a clear license plate, IL-P82763, matching the one Frank had provided. She turned slightly, quickly attaching the tiny tracking device to the underside of her car. Then she walked to the garage door, pretending to look around. This place is so quiet. Are you working alone? Yeah, don't like strangers. Less trouble. I see. And your name? Marco? Correct. Jenny smiled. I have a friend in Chicago. Also worked in a garage called Lincoln something, 10 years ago. Also alone. Just like you. Manny paused. The hand holding the wrench paused in midair for a second. Then he bent down and continued. I don't know. I don't know anyone in Chicago. Really? Jenny knew she couldn't push too hard. She backed off. I'll be back later. Can I park the car here? Whatever. But you have to pay $50 in advance. Okay. That night, at a cheap motel not far from the shop, Jenny opened her laptop and monitored the signal from the device attached to the car. Manny didn't move, but at 10:37 p.m., the motion indicator turned on. He was leaving the garage. Jenny quickly put on her coat, climbed into the car, and kept a safe distance. He drove through town, turning onto Highway 30 heading west. The road was empty, the headlights illuminating the bare trees on both sides of the road. Jenny kept a distance of about a kilometer, just enough to be undetected. Around 11 o'clock, Manny's car turned onto a dirt road that led to a desolate area, an old, long-abandoned power station. He stopped the car, got out, and made a phone call. Jenny quietly parked the car far away, using the remote camera to zoom in. He is calling someone. I know. Someone just came to the used car lot in Chicago. An old lady, and a little kid. I think they know. Silent. No need to hide. I can handle it. Just keep my name out of the papers. It's been 10 years, and no one remembers. Jenny's heart was pounding. She recorded the whole thing. When Manny got back in the car, she curled up in the seat, waited for him to leave, then turned around and headed back to the motel. She had found the missing piece. He knew, and was trying to cover it up. The next morning, Jenny sent the recording and photos to Frank DeWitt, with notes. An hour later, he called back. You have what you need. With that recording, I will forward it to my friend at the FBI. They can get an arrest warrant for him. Or at least, a search warrant for the old property. Jenny was silent. Are you sure? Yes, but need Mrs. Nguyen to confirm the bracelet and be ready to be a witness if needed. Jenny nodded, knowing Frank couldn't see. She has waited her whole life to say this. She will agree. That evening, before leaving Indiana, Jenny drove one more time around the Alvarez Auto Works. A feeling of unease rose in her heart. Manny is not a simple killer. He is a man who knows how to wait, how to hide, and most dangerously, he is used to the system's indifference. She knew time was running out. If the police didn't act quickly, Manny would escape again, and this time, no one would find him. Chicago. A gray morning in early November. The container yard behind 31st Street was cordoned off with yellow tape that read, "Crime scene, do not cross." On the cold ground, the sound of drills and concrete cutters echoed like the roar of hell. Jenny Tran stood next to Mrs. Lan, both wearing thick coats, their faces tense. Mrs. Lan's hand tightly gripped the old photo, now the key evidence to reopen Tin's missing person case. Her eyes were sunken, but still had an unusual light, a strange determination that Jenny had never seen in anyone else. Frank DeWitt was there, too. He stood with two FBI agents, one a supervisory special agent, the other a member of the forensics team. This was no longer a local investigation, it had become federal after Manny's recording was deemed sufficient to prosecute. We determined that the concrete layer below is structurally different. The settlement is uneven, and the foundation does not match the original construction map, the forensic agent said. Holding a ground plan, the cutter began to work, screaming as it cut deep into the cold cement. Each slash felt like a knife slashing into the layer of time that had covered a decade of crimes. Mrs. Lan closed her eyes as the first slabs of concrete were lifted. Beneath them was a layer of dark, damp earth, lined with plywood and black plastic. A musty stench wafted up, clinging to the chilly air. "There are signs of burial," a technician spoke up, his voice no longer calm. A shovel was brought in. After a few thrusts, the hand touched something, not of earth. A piece of cloth, blue, hem with faint gold trim. "Stop," the forensic officer signaled, "we will handle it manually." Jenny covered her mouth with her hand. Mrs. Lan stood still as if frozen. Her legs gave way slightly, but Frank caught her skinny arm. A nylon bag containing the skeleton gradually appeared, and on the skeleton's left wrist, a red rubber bracelet. The words blurred by time, but still enough to read the last three characters, NL. The whole area fell silent. Only the sound of cameras taking pictures of the scene could be heard. A forensic officer carefully picked up the bracelet with tweezers and placed it in an evidence bag. "We will do a DNA test to confirm the identity." But the surveillance agent looked at Jenny, then turned his eyes to Mrs. Lan. "Everything matches. The location, the bracelet, the time of burial. Your story is true." Mrs. Lan said nothing. She just sat down on the edge of the newly peeled cement steps, her hands on her knees, her eyes looking into the hole, as if she could see the image of the little boy running around, holding a carton of milk and smiling, calling out, "Grandma." Tears do not flow. For so many years, they have dried up. Jenny knelt down beside her, put her hand on her shoulder, and choked up. "We found him. Tin has been found." Mrs. Lan nodded very slightly. "It's always been there. It's just, people don't want to see it." 2 days later, DNA results confirmed that the remains were those of Nguyen Tin Loc, who had been missing since 2013. Local media reported. The Asian boy missing for 10 years was found after a persistent investigation by an elderly woman and a police intern. A federal arrest warrant was issued in Cook County for Marco Alvarez, aka Manny, who has been living a low-key life for a decade. FBI agents arrested him at his home in Warsaw, Indiana, early Wednesday morning as he was preparing to get into a getaway car after seeing the news on TV. Manny was silent when he was arrested, but when he was handcuffed, he turned to an agent and said, "I knew this day would come. It's just, I didn't think it would come from an old lady and a young apprentice." A week later, a small funeral was held at Forest Home Cemetery, under the shade of an old oak tree and a row of fluttering American flags. The small coffin was covered with a white cloth. No one spoke loudly. There was only the sound of the wind blowing through the leaves. And Mrs. Land's voice, whispering as she placed her hand on her grandson's coffin. I took you home. You are not alone anymore. No trumpets, no flowery words, just people who truly believe in justice, and people who refuse to let memories be forgotten. That evening, in the small attic, Jenny and Mrs. Land sat with a cup of hot tea. Where are you going? Jenny asked softly. She has no one left. But she thinks she will not leave. Stay here, where Tin used to live, study, and dream. She will tell his story to the other children, so that they will know that there was someone who lived as a silent hero. Jenny looked at her and said, I won't let this go. I want to find out why Manny wasn't caught in the first place. Was there someone behind the scenes? The old cops, tampered records, I want to know. Mrs. Land nodded, smiling for the first time. Good. The truth is not to be found. The truth must be told. Cook County Jail, Interrogation Room Number 4. Friday, 8:32 a.m. No two-way mirrors, no hidden cameras, just two metal chairs facing each other, with a cold iron table between them. On one side was Jenny Tran, hair tied back, eyes razor sharp. On the other side was Manny, the man who used to be Marco Alvarez, hunched over, still handcuffed, but his smirk did little to hide his contempt. You're not a real police officer, he began. No, I'm just the one who got you caught, Jenny replied calmly. But I didn't come here to take credit. I want to hear your story. From the beginning. Manny chuckled, then leaned back. Are you sure? There are things, once you hear them, you can't erase them from your mind. Is there anything worse than a child being killed and buried under concrete? His eyes changed, no longer defiant, now weary. Okay. He came to the shop at 7:30 that morning. As usual, he stood outside looking at the car, holding a carton of milk. I knew him, the kid who often stopped by. That time, I called him in, said I would show him the engine. Manny said, his voice not shaking, not regretful. Jenny sat still, not taking any notes. She just looked straight into his eyes. I didn't mean to kill him, really. I was just unloading a car that had been reported stolen. A little shoplifting. He saw it, and asked, is what I'm doing wrong? I panicked. He threatened to tell his mother. I grabbed his hand, and pulled him back. He slipped and hit his head on the foot of the car lift. And then? Jenny said coldly. He was unconscious, bleeding, a lot. I didn't know what to do. I didn't call an ambulance. I was scared. I had a suspended sentence. If I got caught, my life would be over. Jenny looked at him fixedly. So you hid the body? Manny nodded, eyes lost. I covered it with a cloth. It was about to rain. I dragged the body to the back of the shop, dug a temporary hole with a shovel, and buried it. A few weeks later, I came back, poured cement over it, let it lie. Silence. Only Manny's heavy breathing echoed in the closed space. But what interests me is not just the fact that you killed Tin, Jenny said, her voice becoming serious, but why you weren't thoroughly investigated at the time. Who helped you? Manny chuckled. No one helped me, at first. Don't beat around the bush. Okay. He leaned back. When I was first questioned, there was a lieutenant with the investigator. He didn't ask me much. Just said something like, if there's no camera, no evidence, then there's no case. Jenny wrote down and asked. His name? Lieutenant Edward Galloway. Was in charge of the West Side area in 2013. He once came to Lincoln to get his car fixed. I helped him change a part without recording it. He knew, and I think that was his way of repaying the favor. Jenny froze. She had heard the name before. Galloway, now retired, but in 2013 a big shot on the force. Someone who had the power to make or break small file investigations. What did Galloway do next? He told me to get out of Chicago. Said, if you want to live, don't let anyone remember your face. So I went to Indiana. Changed my name. Started a new life, at least until she found me. Manny looked up at Jenny. This time his eyes were not mocking. Not challenging, just empty. I didn't kill it because I wanted to. But when I chose not to save it, then I chose to let it die. As Jenny stepped out of the interrogation room, a cold winter wind blew through the hallway. She clenched her fists. Her heart was still pounding, not with fear, but with anger. Galloway. She opened her phone and looked up her old profile. Just as Manny had said, He had retired in 2019 and was now living in the suburb of Oak Park, about a 30-minute drive from Chicago. Jenny called Frank DeWitt. Frank, Manny said, there was a lieutenant, Edward Galloway, who interfered with the investigation. Frank was silent for a moment, then replied, I'm not surprised. He was the one who reminded me to stop digging into the tin case that year. I'll meet him with you. That evening, in the small apartment, Mrs. Land sat by the window, looking at the streetlights reflecting on the glass. Jenny put her hands on the table. We found Tin's body, but justice is not enough. Someone helped cover up the crime. I will continue. Mrs. Land nodded without hesitation. You know, for the past 10 years, I thought justice was finding his body. But now, I understand, justice is not letting this happen to another child. Jenny took her hand. I promise. Oak Park, a Saturday morning in late November. The quiet little street was shaded by bare trees, and the wind blew through the old-fashioned houses as if they were breathing their last breaths of autumn. Number 74A stood tall, with its peeling white picket fence and withered rose bushes casting shadows on the red brick porch. On the wooden door, a faded brass plaque read, E. Galloway, retired police lieutenant. Frank DeWitt stepped up the front steps, Jenny following, clutching his shoulder bag. Inside it was a tape recorder, a brief case file, and a power of attorney from the public defender's office. Frank knocked 3 times. Silence. A minute later, the door opened. A tall, silver-haired man in a gray sweater stood looking at them, his eyes bloodshot, as if he hadn't slept all night. I knew this day would come, Galloway said hoarsely. Then please talk like a responsible man, Frank replied. He avoided Jenny's eyes and stepped back inside. Come in. The living room was simple. No family photos, no souvenirs. There was only an old leather chair, a wooden coffee table, and a dusty bookshelf. Jenny placed the recording device on the table. We are investigating your involvement in the disappearance of Nguyen Tin Loc in 2013. And for what reason did you let the suspect, Manny, leave Chicago without being prosecuted? Galloway sat down, not speaking at once. He poured water from the water dispenser, then looked up. Manny is the son of my late best friend. I promised to take care of him after his father died of cancer. In 2013, when Manny's name appeared in the file, I knew things could get bad, but I didn't expect it to go this far. So you blocked the investigation? Jenny tightened her voice. I didn't delete the file. I just didn't push it to the level of prosecution. When there was no clear evidence, I chose to put it aside, let it sink into oblivion. I thought if Manny left, everything would be closed. Frank stood up, angry. The boy was only 9 years old. Galloway, he had no chance of living. And you let his killer disappear just because of personal feelings? Galloway was silent. Jenny looked straight at him. Your name is not in the report, but Manny's testimony, the edited investigation records, and his exit records all bear traces of interference. Do you know how many families have been devastated by such internal decisions? Galloway looked up. His eyes were no longer guarded, only exhausted. Do you know what haunts me the most? It's not that I helped Manny escape. It's that I've been sitting in my house for years, and every time I see the news about a missing child, I think of that boy's face. Tin. Every night I hear him ask, why? So what are you going to do with the rest of your life? Jenny asked. Galloway sighed. I have nothing left to keep. If you want to record, make it public. Denounce, go ahead. I won't make excuses anymore. 3 days later, Jenny sent the recording to veteran Chicago Tribune investigative reporter Roberta Ellis, who had repeatedly exposed police scandals. Roberta listened to the tape without blinking. Do you want to go to the press? This is not a small matter. If it is made public, it will involve a lot of people. I want justice, not just for Tin, but for all the children who are ignored by the system. On December 3rd, the Tribune ran a special article, Buried Under Concrete: The Truth About the Missing Asian Boy and the Police Cover-Up. The cover photo is a red bracelet, the final piece of evidence that brings the truth back to light. Public opinion is in turmoil. The Chicago Police Department was forced to open an internal investigation. Lieutenant Edward Galloway was stripped of his pension and charged with obstruction of justice. Several officers who worked on the case were placed on administrative leave pending the investigation. At the corner of Little Village, where Mrs. Lan has been selling newspapers for the past 10 years. Everything seems the same, but passers-by no longer turn away when they see her. They stop, shake hands, and thank her. I read the newspaper. You are very brave, a young girl said as she bought a copy. Mrs. Lan just smiled lightly. I'm not brave, I'm just an old lady missing her grandchild. A week later, at Cesar Chavez Elementary School, Jenny was invited to speak at Tin's memorial service, where the school had erected a small memorial plaque, engraved with the following words: "Because the children are not being listened to." Jenny stepped up to the podium, looked at the students, and said softly, "Sometimes, a small photo, a rubber bracelet, or a grandmother's voice can change a whole system. And sometimes, all we need is to not give up." She looked down at the front row where Mrs. Lan was sitting, tears flowing silently. Justice doesn't always come in time. But when it does, it must be big enough not to repeat the same mistakes. On New Year's Eve, a light snow began to fall. Jenny returned to the small attic where Mrs. Lan lived. The two of them sat by the window, watching the snow cover the roof. "Tin loves snow," she said, "every time it snows. He asks to go out and make a snowman, even though his hands are freezing. Do you think it is at rest yet?" Mrs. Lan looked up at the sky, then nodded. "It has been found. No one will forget it again. That is enough." Jenny squeezed her hand. They said nothing more. They just sat quietly together, in the middle of snowy Chicago, in the middle of a noisy city, where a boy named Tin had finally been given his name back, his memories back, and his justice back.